Good afternoon. I'm Jim Hamilton, representative on the east side of Bozeman, out to the Park County line, down south to Langer Campground and up to Grandview Heights type area. And wanted to do a little educational session today with you on how to use the leg.mt.gov screen. So as you can see on the upper part of my screen here, when we enter that, what you'll get is this page. Right now, it's got some temporary things over here on the right-hand side that we'll sort of ignore. These are mostly for legislators. But there's some important things here that I'll cover with you for the public that you might find useful in this next session. So let's start with how do I even get in touch with my legislator? Well, if we come down here to find a legislator, I'm sure you probably all know who your legislator is, but in case you don't, pop into there and it will ask you if you want to search by legislator roster. This is in alphabetical order. You can search on the Senate side, or you can search on the House side by just clicking on that. That's pretty straightforward. There's the contact information over to the right. You can click on, let's say, Kim here, who's the minority leader. You could click on that. You've got her picture, contact information. Usually there's an email. She doesn't have one in there. So you've got all of your quick contact information that way. Now, what I want to do is go back, because if you want to do a contact for your legislator, you already know who your legislator is. Maybe you want to come down here and click on this button. Gives you some tips for how to contact your legislator, and it gives you an information desk number right here. So that's another option. If you do want to, for example, talk to the entire committee, you could call the information desk, leave a message, and it would go to everybody in the committee. As you see here, it says callers may leave a message for up to 5 individual legislators or 1 legislative committee per call. So 2 different ways. If you want to go directly, go back to that page and you'll have the email address. If you'd like to go to a full committee, do this, or a group of legislators. And what'll happen there is somebody will take your message, type it into the system, and it gets emailed to us. Now, there is another section right down here that I'd really like you to pay attention to. I'm not going to go over it, but it's tips for how to make your communication more valuable. And the bottom line is we get a lot of form messages, and we don't really, you don't really want to pay a lot of attention to form messages. We don't have that much time. So your unique communication is what's really valuable to us. So take a look at that. If you have questions, happy to talk more about that at another time. So, okay, we've got our legislator. We know how to find them. We know how to contact them. But what about the committees they're on? How do we know what committees they're on? Easy. Button is both here as well as up here at the top. You can get there either direction. This one up at the top talks a little bit about committees in general, more than this one does down here. But this one is where I would go if I were looking in the session. So I've got, comes in here, talks about the different types of committees that help administer the legislature, interims you won't really need, and the session or standing committees. And that puts you in here where you can take a quick look at who's on what committees for either chamber. Being in the House, I always go here and click over on the House side, and there you have a listing of everybody. The only thing that's quirky as you look at this, and by the way, it tells you the meeting time and the room number. The only thing that's quirky here is when you get down to the appropriations committees, they have subcommittees. So what you're seeing down here is the subcommittees that meet daily in the first 45 days. There's also a main appropriations committee that all of these people serve on. But if you're talking a budget issue in the Health and Human Services arena, here's the committee. Okay, So that tells you that what committees. Now, you may say to yourself, well, I'm really interested in a bill. So up here it would be laws and bills. And it gives you, this middle section is laws. Most people aren't going to look at that. There's some calendar information here that you might want to take a peek at. But what we're mostly going to be interested in is this bill lookup. Okay, click on that. And the most important thing to notice here is up here, it's going to automatically take you to the 2021 session. But let's say, for example, we wanted to see something in 2019, and I'm going to do that because right now there's not a lot in the 2021 session that you can see. So you could look it up by, the broadest way is by subject. And you can see there's bunches and bunches of subjects that will come up here with this drop-down arrow. But maybe you say, no, I'm really particularly interested in something that Pat Flowers is doing. And so you just fill in Pat's name there, and up would pop, when you click on find, the opportunity to, it's slow. You can see we're still circling here. But this should come up. Here we go. So these were the bills that Pat Flowers, your local senator here, introduced in the 2019 session. If you wanted to, I mean, this is sort of the final scoreboard. Here it gives you the short title of it, but the final scoreboard for last year tells you, or last session tells you, well, Pat had 2 of them die in committee, but this one, chapter number assigned, means the bill passed and it's now in law somewhere. So let's just maybe take a quick glance at that one. So we come over here to this link, Senate Bill 70, and that SB, of course, means Senate Bill. If you saw one from me, it would be HB, House Bill. And this will constantly be filled out with steps that occur with a bill that Pat Flowers puts in, or I put in, anyone does. So in this case, you can see Pat originally submitted this bill title back in September of 18. And the requester started drafting it and so forth, gives you all the dates and the activity. And then the bill was introduced. That means Pat picked it up and, or in this case, I guess this was probably a committee bill is what it looks like, because it was introduced early, introduced before the session actually started. And it was referred to the Committee for Fish and Game. And then when there's actually a hearing, it'll show up here and you'll be able to listen to the hearing if you wanted. Shows you the vote for the most part. If bills are tabled, sometimes these votes don't show up here. And tabling means that they just decided not to vote yes or no. They've just decided to put it back in the folder, so to speak. And the schedule continues with second reading and third reading, and then going over to the House side of things, where the H shows up. And once again, same thing, goes through the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks Committee, and then goes out onto the second floor, or the floor for the second reading, which, and this is on second reading, is sort of when Pat or any legislator gets to stand up and talk about their bill. And on second reading, this passed 78-22. And then the next day or shortly thereafter, that was probably a Friday would be my guess, that Monday came back on the schedule for third reading, which is nobody talks. It's just a very quick vote. And the bill passed third reading. And then some other things happened to it before it gets its chapter number. This enrolling is just a legal term, doesn't really mean a whole much to the public. So kind of a journal or history of what happened with the bill, and you can look this up. It will be there'll be ongoing filling in of these lines, I guess you might say. Okay, so we looked up a bill by a legislator's name. We looked up a bill by a subject name. So let's go up here and instead look up a bill by a bill number. If you just happen to know the number, you can fill it in there. So in this case, HB 258, it's a bill in the House, we know that. And from that title, and 258 happens to be a bill that I introduced called Revised Laws for Passing Emergency Vehicles. Same history, kind of a journal of what's going on. And this is the back and forth between the bill drafter and myself, getting the bill the right way that we wanted it. And then this one, because it was not a committee bill, but an individual legislator bill, it was introduced after the session started. And at that same time, it was referred to the Judiciary Committee. Got a hearing. In this case, it also had a fiscal note, which means what the fiscal impact was. And then the bill got tabled. In other words, this actually was a party line vote. All the Republicans voted to table or voted no, and all of the Democrats voted yes. And when they do that, they then reverse themselves and table the bill. So it's not dead, but it's sitting on the table, so to speak. And then it was never able to be taken back off the table. We never had a majority of votes. So it missed its deadline for transmittal, meaning that's when it had to be passed by that time to go over to the Senate. It's actually prior to this date, but that's just the date they entered it. All right, so that's what you can get a lot of information by looking at that. Now, let's see, let's do one other step, and that is look at this stuff up here at the top. So the LC number means nothing to you. That's what a bill gets when it's being drafted initially. But what is important over here is a current bill text. If a bill is being amended along the way, this will keep changing. And you'll have the opportunity to see the previous version. Now this one didn't get amended, but I could go in here and look at how's the bill look? What's in there? What did we change? And maybe on some other video, Allison will talk about convention of how to read these, because you could drive yourself crazy trying to read every word in here. But there's, for example, it's a convention to do this strikeout here. And so you don't really have to read that section because nothing's changing in this bill in that section. You're just striking out some words. So we'll come back to that at another time and learn how to read those quickly. All right, fiscal note is there as well. And that pops up. Might be, in some cases, you might see a multiplicity of these as there's sort of argument back and forth about how does this really affect the budget. And this was odd in that they did do a fiscal note, but there was no fiscal impact. So it doesn't usually happen that way, but they did in this case. All right, so we've looked at your legislator, we've looked at committees, we've looked at a bill. We should probably look over here real quickly because there's some useful information on the calendar. So I'm trying to get back here. So this is back near the start. We're back at that laws and bills page, or basically, let's go back to the home page. So here we are back on the home page, and we want to see what does the calendar of the session look like. And that's in here. I have a countdown for some reason. I don't know what people are that excited about it. But here's the session calendar. And gives you a little bit of a look. For most people, this isn't going to make a lot of sense, but these green days mean we're not meeting on Saturdays in January. This is a draft schedule. After that, we meet 6 days a week. But there are certain restrictions, and most of these are intended for legislators, but there's one or two down here that are useful for the public. And that would be, for example, this is the last day to introduce a general bill. And this is when bills go over to the other chamber. So a bill that's started in the House has to be approved, or has to be approved to be sent to the other chamber, or vice versa. And then we have a little transmittal break here. Hopefully legislators will get a chance to visit with you during that time period. And then this is when let's see, day 40, day 60 is actually when this goes over. You've got this actually day 67. The budget really goes over at about day 60 is what I was looking for, and I don't see that one listed right here now. But anyway, that's probably the most important thing, goes from the House to the Senate. All right, so we're back to the main page again, and I think you have everything you need at the moment there. There are updates that would be available and probably be somewhere in this session info area, which is back to the calendar, but I think that might be where they don't have it here right now, where you would track down what bills are scheduled for what committees. And we'll update you on that as they actually get it in place. Sometimes it's here in this item, but right now they don't have it there, so we can't tell you. But we'll let you know when that comes. With that, I'll close it off, and if you have questions, please let us know. If you have ideas for other topics for future ones of these, we'd be glad to hear those as well.